After the ship was cleared, I was soon off the boat headed for immigration, and soon on a bus headed for Catherine the Great's summer palace. A short history as we head out of town and then onto the ZSD high-speed ring road, which our ship passed under when cruising into St. Petersburg. We are now on our way to the town of Pushkin, where the palace is located about 30 kilometers south of St. Petersburg. The summer palace was actually named for Catherine I, wife of Peter the Great, and then his daughter, Empress Elizabeth, is primarily responsible for the grandeur of the palace. She also arranged for the marriage of Peter III, a nephew of Peter the Great, and a 15-year-old named Sophie from Germany, today's Poland. Sophie eventually became Catherine the Great, and today is who the palace is known for. As we entered the township of Pushkin, where the grounds of Catherine the Great's summer palace are, the entrance is marked by these Egyptian-styled gates. They're styled after the temple of Khonsu, precinct of Amun-Ra at Karnak in Luxor, Egypt, a place I have been and seen the original structure after which these were styled. That was on my excursion to Egypt in 2013. We parked just short of the palace and walked the rest of the way. Entertained briefly by a Russian military band. As I approached the palace grounds proper, there was a statue of Alexander Pushkin, after which the town is named. Pushkin was not only considered to be the greatest Russian poet, but also the founder of modern Russian literature. As I start my walk down the face of the palace, immediately obvious are the 5 onion-shaped domes over the palace chapel with over 200 pounds of gold leaf gilding, which makes for a spectacular sight. The palace was immense. It measures 1,066 feet from side to side, or 1/5 of a mile, approximately 3½ football fields long. This is the grand staircase that leads from the ground floor up to the spectacular rooms that the palace is so famous for. These rooms are referred to as the Golden Enfilade, which is the incredibly ostentatious grand suite of formal rooms. They are all huge and lavishly appointed and decorated with inlaid wood flooring, musical instruments, vases, paintings both hung and on the ceilings, mirrors, elaborately upholstered furniture, sculptures including many cupids or cherubs, and even a large Dutch Delft tile furnace in every room to keep the rooms warm during the winter. A huge gala ballroom where lavish parties were held. And then I come to the internationally famous Amber Room. Some claim it to be the 8th wonder of the world. Amber is actually a fossilized tree resin petrified over literally millions of years. It is neither stone nor a mineral. It's a biolith and very precious non-mineral gemstone. This room is completely covered with amber. Just before I left the palace and all of its remarkable rooms to visit the beautiful gardens, I saw this Romanov family tree. I will point out some of the more significant figures. The first one is Peter the Great, who brought Russia out of the Dark Ages by westernizing many aspects of Russia, like the Navy, the Army, and the educational system. Next is Empress Elizabeth, who apparently was quite beautiful, but also extremely vicious, having the tongues ripped out of individuals she did not like. She is also responsible for the ornate decoration of Catherine the Great's palace and was the last of the full-blood Romanovs, being the daughter of Peter the Great. Next is Catherine the Great. She ruled for 34 years and ruled with an iron hand, attaining the throne by initiating a coup against her husband, Peter II, and having him killed. Obviously famous for her winter palace, but she had what I would consider one of the world's renowned love affairs, like Cleopatra and Mark Antony, Robert Kennedy and Marilyn Monroe. It was Catherine and her dashing military man, Potemkin. Quite a story. And finally, there was Tsar Nicholas II. Needless to say, he is worthy of notoriety because he was the ruler when the Bolshevik Revolution occurred. And when the Bolsheviks took over, Tsar Nicholas and his family were slaughtered, and that was the end of the 300-year rule of Russia by the Romanovs. So, now out to the spectacular grounds in back of the palace. The grounds are incredibly manicured and beautiful, with a number of exquisite bathhouses used for visiting dignitaries. It is so beautiful that it is no wonder many weddings are performed at the palace in the gardens. The chapel gold-flaked, onion-shaped domes are incredible from any angle. One last pass through the gardens behind the palace, and on my way to the bus, I pass souvenir kiosks and a street minstrel with his 2 performing monkeys. Then on the bus and back to St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg in Russian. Back onto the ZSD high-speed ring road, headed back into town. On the way to lunch, we pass a statue of Peter the Great. Catherine the Great commissioned the sculpture in an effort to align herself with Peter the Great in the eyes of her citizens. Her name appears under Peter's on the side of the statue. We arrived back in town at our restaurant for lunch on the Dvortsovaya Naberezhnaya, or Palace Embankment Road, just short of the Annunciation Bridge, where our ship is located. So we head into the restaurant for an authentic Russian meal. We make a toast. Toasting in Russian is a very complicated process. They don't have one general cheer like we do. They have one for probably 24 different situations. But to your health specifically is za zdrovia. So after our toast, we had lunch, which consisted of a Russian-style Greek salad, mushroom soup, and pelmeni, which is Russian dumplings made with meat and onions, with a spoonful of sour cream added on top. And when I went to the restroom, I had to get a photo of the plumbing. After lunch, and about to get on the bus headed for our next excursion, I get a panorama of the Neva River. Back on the bus, we're coming up on the Luminosa Bridge. There were at one time many of this style bridge, but only 2 remain. Luminosa was quite an individual, kind of like a Ben Franklin, an author, a scientist, an architect, and there is today a porcelain factory of some fame which still carries his name. The bridge was not named in his honor until 1948. He was basically a one-man intellectual advancement society for Russia during Empress Elizabeth and Catherine the Great's time on the throne. This afternoon's agenda is a visit to St. Isaac's Cathedral. As I said, it's a huge tourist attraction and one of the largest churches in the world, with a dome containing almost 1,000 pounds of gold. It has not been a church since 1931, when it was turned into a museum. I was told and have read the interior is spectacular, but I'm not much of a museum person, so I stayed outside. One more note on Lomonosov is that he was also hired as an architect-artist to replace some of the deteriorating art in the chapel into mosaic reconstruction. The cathedral itself stands on 10,000 tree trunks sunk into the marshy ground where the cathedral sits. And an additional interesting side note is that the dome of St. Isaac's was the inspiration for our United States Capitol dome. In the plaza in front of St. Isaac's stands a statue dedicated to Nicholas I. At the time of construction of the statue, because of how it was so big and how it was assembled in pieces with the horse on only 2 points of contact, it was considered to be a technological marvel. As for Nicholas I, his reign was significant because of geographical expansion, economic growth, and industrial expansion. He was able to become ruler even though he faced a revolution as he took the reins of power. But because of the revolt, he became a tyrannical despot, allowing no dissent in the ranks. But the seeds of dissent had already been planted and grew greatly during his reign. It was 62 years after his death that the dynasty met its demise with Tsar Nicholas II and the Bolshevik Revolution.